Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Black Lightning. A great season premiere, a great way to start off the season. A lot of interesting things. Basically, in the grand scheme of things, it's basically been like a month since season 2's finale, and obviously, you know, what we picked up from the trailers and stuff like that. I mean, if you've saw them, obviously the ASA has kind of taken over. Odell is kind of running things, and it's kind of interesting to see where everything kind of goes. Like they have all these metahumans from the tubes and everything, so it's like, okay, some metahumans that were from the tubes who escaped, some were caught again, some are still out there, but they're kind of put through this rigorous questioning every day. And at first it seems, and you know, we see Jeff go through the same thing. At first he's resistant, but after a few days, well, many days later, he ends up kind of, you know, talking about his situation. Basically, it's like, oh, when do you start using green light? It's actually kind of a sad situation because, like, the first girl, her situation is she never took green light. Girls at her school that were just being outright assholes drugged her, like mixed it in with stuff. And I think it was like mixed in with her food or something like that. And she got expelled from the school she was at. And by the time it came out, like, those girls finally confessed what they did, it was already too late. The damage had been done. So I was like, that's shitty. So what's also interesting though is, and I figured as much, the whole thing of like Odell's just going to use, like, that Jeff would have to go with things because it's like to make sure that Lynn and the rest of his family would say. Well, what's interesting, and I was actually surprised by it, the fact is Lynn's not actually there with him at first. It's not until later on that Lynn gets folded into this as well. Like, Lynn, you have to stay here too because the Markovians might come after you yet too because you are invaluable. So there's that whole situation. I was also thought it was kind of interesting because I thought maybe like the whole Nissa situation, I thought like she was, you know, Anissa was by herself, you know, kind of going rogue, you know, as Blackbird. Because I always forget, like, I had forgotten like her other persona's code name, but I thought she, you know, based on the trailers and everything, I thought she was doing that alone. But it's like, you know, it's a calculated plan between her and Gamby about how to handle this situation, because basically they're kind of, well, because basically and then obviously, once again, I brought this up when I talked about Supergirl, where it's like Supergirl makes parallels to real life. This is making parallels to real life too, about the whole like kids being separated from their family type of situation. Obviously, they shifted it for this narrative, but obviously there is the literal comparison to real life in the same regard. But these kids who are taken away because they're potential metahumans and stuff like that, they're kids that haven't done anything wrong. But the thing is, you don't, if they're potential metahumans, you don't want the Markovians to get them. They're better safe here than being kidnapped by the Markovians. So that's kind of the justification for it. Obviously, Henderson doesn't like the way this whole thing is going down, but he's kind of being forced to the point he punches the dude that's in command, Carson, who isn't the actor's name Christopher B. Duncan? Isn't that it? Because I was trying to remember, like, obviously, like, Jamie Foxx show is like one of the things you best know him from, but he's popped up in different things. But I was like, what was it recently he popped up in? And remember, he played MG's dad in Legacies. That was the most recent thing I remember. I was like, oh, so the CW connection. But nevertheless, the guys there beat the crap out of Henderson because Henderson punched the dude, because it's like, oh yeah, basically put you in a position where it's like, basically you'll lose money and you can't take care of your family and stuff like that. Carson's talking mad shit. What was also interesting is when he fought that metahuman Ned. What was kind of interesting, where it's like, I was trying to figure out what Ned's ability was, because it almost seemed like telekinesis, but it's not. Basically, he can dissolve stuff, but he was able to kind of flick bullets back at people. But it was actually kind of interesting to hear him talk, because he was basically saying, like, the fact of the matter is, he was like, I'm not even like a soldier, and I was used as a pawn in war. Like, I was sent in to kind of be an assassin to kill people. But for him, it's like, it was too much, because it's like so much death. And it's not like he was a soldier. He's like, I'm a criminal that you forced to be your weapon. And now the Markovians have him and potentially sent him in. And it was also interesting because later when we ended up finding out that, because it seemed like sometimes during the fight, it looked like Carson was doing the whole like thing the way his power looked. I was like, the same way Ned's power looked. I was like, that's interesting. But later when we find out he has a power, he's a metahuman too. The fact of the matter is he's able to copy the abilities of nearby metahumans. So I was like, oh, that is a pretty handy damn ability, which I always like mimicking abilities like that. I always just think they're kind of interesting. But the thing is, he doesn't hold on to the abilities, which is kind of like a nice drawback to his power. As long as you're like away from him, like you have to be in a certain proximity for him to copy your abilities. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But it's kind of the thing of like, yeah, he's the last person you want with powers because he's kind of an asshole. I mean, the ASA is kind of running things, and obviously that's the whole point of like, the whole thing with the government and everything. It's like, hey, the fact of the matter is this even constitutional? But technically it's within the frames of the law. But it's like, at the end of the day, it don't matter what the law is. This is kind of super messed up because there's almost like no due process in the whole situation. Obviously, Freeland's kind of turned upside down because everyone's like, oh, Black Lightning is gone. It's like he doesn't care. He might even be dead. But some people are looking like, at least we have Blackbird and she's looking after us. She actually cares about us, unlike Black Lightning. So that turns into a whole conversation in itself. And even Jeff's getting to the point where he's like, yeah, the fact is being locked up makes him feel like Black Lightning is dead. But what was interesting, though, is it starts seeing the fact is what they're doing to him in the facility ends up supercharging his ability or something, because now he can actually see through the floor, which even like Lynn later on is like, oh, but you could do that before. It's like, yeah, but I need a combination of my powers plus Gambi's tech to do it. Now I'm doing it super clearly with just my own abilities. They unlock something that was already there. It's a latent ability he has, which is like, okay, so they are making him stronger, which begs the question, like, what else will Jeff be able to, eventually be capable of? And there was a big question this episode answered too that I was curious about. Is the pit in the same place as his facility? And yes, it is, because he ends up looking down and he sees Tobias. It was interesting because he was like, yeah, it looks like Tobias isn't in the best condition, which it almost seemed sympathetic. I mean, maybe it wasn't even sympathetic. It's just kind of like, man, I wasn't planning on killing the bastard, but the bastard's kind of potentially going to die on his own, because basically he's aging rapidly and he looks a hot mess. Just because age is catching up to him because he stayed young for so long. But I guess it's like, because whatever lights they have him in, whatever pit they have him in, I guess is slowly kind of nullifying his ability to like stay young, and probably nullifying his superhuman strength too. So it's a thing of like, slowly but surely he's aging up, probably. So like the more time he stays in, the quicker he is going to, I mean, he's literally in the process of dying with the whole situation. So that was kind of interesting. There's the whole Issa situation. He's kind of used as an interrogator, and we learned some very, very valuable information, because it turns out Tobias reveals to Issa, because Odell keeps pushing him, Issa, to ask him questions, and it turns out like, oh yeah, Proctor, he wasn't a rogue agent. In fact, he was meant to be set up as a fall guy, because he was actually taking orders from Odell, who were taking orders from the president. So it's like everything Proctor was doing was straight up part of like Odell wants to make it seem like, oh, Proctor was a bad guy, came in to kind of save the day, which let's face it, we can all admit Odell's kind of an asshole. Was a huge asshole last season and continues to be one now. But the whole point is, hey, come to Freeland, gather up all the metahumans, make them into weapons, and kill anyone that basically has any knowledge of this potentially leading back to the president, because they want a plausible deniability of if anything ever goes down, because the whole thing is to protect the president, making it seem like, oh, what does this all went down without the president knowing, even though he had it hand in all of this. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But poor Issa ends up getting poisoned. But you can tell Odell, it's hard to say whether Odell felt bad about killing him just because he's pretty much a kid, or is it just because, man, your abilities are great, they come with a dangerous task, the whole dangerous thing of like, because it seems so simple just forcing people to tell the truth, but knowing certain truths that shouldn't be known is such a dangerous thing. And it turns out he had poisoned Issa, because Issa figured, he's like, yeah, you're here to kill me because I figured I know too much already. But it's like, oh no, he's like, didn't you come here to kill me? And it's like, oh, I already did because I poisoned your food. Then he has the audacity to tell Lynn, like, hey, you can come see Issa and whatever. It's like, you literally poisoned the kid. You're talking about you're sending him back to his family and everything. It's like, you're so full of shit. And that whole thing about like, oh, Issa was held by the Markovians, they nearly left him for dead and stuff like that. Part of me is like, is that true? Is that more BS? That's the thing with Odell. You can't tell what's real and what's not. We don't know if the rest of that was true or it was just kind of like a no, because it came up last season. I mean, not less as the Markovians, but I'm pretty sure it's Odell and the ASA that has Khalil's body. So they're doing something with that too, showing you just how far they're willing to go, because they're trying to weaponize all these metahumans. But that's what I was wondering, if it's a situation of, is everything really the Markovian angle that they make it out to be? Maybe it is. They are a threat and everything. But at the same time, it's like, was Ned actually a Markovian? Or did they well, no, because they did make a point that he came with other people. Because part of my conspiracy me kind of was thinking, like, do you think Odell kind of set the whole thing up to make it seem like they're Markovians just so he can have an excuse to do what he's doing? Either way, I don't know. there's actually a lot going down. I thought was kind of interesting. When that girl later on shows up and she's like in that place and she's training with her powers, I'm like, wow, her powers are similar to Jennifer's. I'm like, what the hell is up with that? And then like later on when she's talking to that boy and she said, oh, my name's Jennifer, I'm like, you just got, I was like, how the hell would you do that? But it's like Gamby's really kicked up the tech because he's got, Anissa's car decked out. She's even got her place decked out with kind of like this AI system and stuff like that. It's like, yo. And even Jennifer using like this cloaking device to make herself look like somebody else, which Gamby uses that same technology later on. But it was interesting because Jennifer still hasn't gotten full control of her power. She's saying that basically if she holds onto it too long, because it starts building up, and it literally physically hurts her to keep it bottled up. So she used it, this whole disguise as a means to go out, do her, kind of release some tension, release the energy. But sadly, it's a thing of like, Anissa's like, the fact of the matter is we don't know what's up with mom and dad when they're going to come home. And the fact of the matter is we don't know who's a spotter. Somebody could be watching, just waiting for an opportunity to strike. So you got to be careful because if anything happens to you, for Anissa, it's like I'm going to lose my mind because it's like I'm already stressed and worried about mom and dad. I can't be, I'm already worried about you on top of that too. Plus she found out Grace is back in the picture and everything. Because Grace is somewhere in Freeland because she ended up turning into like a jaguar or something and ended up, or was it a leopard? It might have been a leopard. I think it was a leopard, and she ended up killing like a guard or something like that. So that's a thing, which I like that we are immediately bringing that back up immediately, like in the first episode of the season of like, yeah, that's still something we still haven't circled back to yet. So there's that. I also like, what's the reporter's name? Her name's Jules. We see her pop up from time to time throughout the episode. She's kind of the interesting aspect to this whole thing because she's like all about the laws and stuff like that, which Pastor Holt's kind of like, because he is okay with like Blackbird and everything and saying like, oh, here you go again with the whole laws conversation, because saying that basically what the ASA is doing, like, yeah, it's like, oh, the government and everything is doing things like, yeah, they're not breaking the law, but it's like it's such a gray area with what they're doing. So it's kind of like getting so caught up in like, oh, but what about the laws and everything? It's kind of the Wild West right now. So I think that's kind of the mentality because they're trying to look out for people, and it's like the government is looking out for their own self-interest. They're not looking out for people, even though they're claiming and pretending like they are. So that's a whole thing in itself because Anissa had worked at that center. She went there because she knew that was a place where all this information about potential people who are metahumans was getting given to the government, which the lady that was with them was like, oh, don't you know something's up here? But the lady had it enough because she was like, oh yeah, like even calling the lady in the front seat a bitch because she's like, I know she knows more than she's letting on. And Anissa kind of has to suck up, kind of deal with it. It's like she agrees with the lady, but it's also like because the lady was kind of chastising her, like, how can you be so okay with this? It's like, I'm low key trying to help with this situation my own way. You just don't know, so that's that whole complicated thing in itself. So, and then there's also that whole conversation with Odell trying to make Lynn feel safer, like, hey, the fact of the matter is you're safe here with me, which is so funny, you saying that over Issa's body. It's like the tragic irony behind that statement. It's just kind of like, because at the end of the day, you're pretending like it's all to keep Lynn and Jeff complacent so that you can get what you want from them. But probably, who's to say when it's all said and done, you don't end up killing them? It's like, oh, you served your purpose. But I doubt so, because they could still be, at the very least when it comes to Jeff, he can be brought into the fold and being used as a weapon, much like Ned was kind of describing his situation. And Lynn could help further facilitate more situations with other metahumans in that whole situation. So it's like, I doubt they'd get killed at the end of this, but they'd be forced to be a part of other stuff in a similar vein. And also there is that whole thing of like, even though Tobias said all that stuff about this and that, he never actually answered the actual question of what was in the suitcase. It must be evidence proving that this is all tied back to POTUS, since we have that whole conversation about because for him to say what he said, because he even said, like, Issa kind of pushed him to be like, what was inside about it? He's like, you don't want to know. You're better off not knowing. In the grand scheme of things, Issa was better off, but Odell put him in that position where it's like, oh shit, because he probably didn't expect Tobias to know what he knew and to pass that on to Issa. I guess it's like not the easiest thing to kill Tobias right now. I guess maybe he can still be useful in some regards, so that's why you're not worried about killing him. Well, it's also the thing of he's literally dying, so it's kind of like all you have to do is wait, which that's potentially going to be your own issue to begin with. So there's that whole aspect. So like I said, not unless it's evidence of like there's something connecting to POTUS, because I would assume so, not unless there's something else in there. But what is interesting is, lo and behold, who has it? Of course, none other than Lala, which I like that aspect because, it's so interesting because Lala just like randomly pops up here and there. Especially last season, it just seemed like he would just randomly pop up here and there. So I guess the ASA is going to potentially be targeting him because he's a special breed all on his own, his whole, particular situation. So I don't know would you even technically count Lala as a metahuman. His situation's a little different, so I'm like, I don't know if that count as like magic or something like that. Different abilities come in, different shapes and forms and stuff like that. Metahumans come in different shapes and forms, but there's also, like I said, it's DC universe, so there's a little mysticism with all of that, but I don't know if they would necessarily qualify that as mysticism. It might just kind of get lumped in with metahuman stuff, but regardless. I didn't even think about that till this episode too, until that dude had brought it up. It's like, oh yeah, I'd rather deal with the ASA rather than the 100. I'm like, right, they're just still around and kicking, but yeah, they can't really do their gang activity right now, considering the fact is, like, ASA's got the place on lockdown, so it's curfews and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to, be a street level gang going up against a government military force, so it'd be kind of like an Area 51 type of situation, if you get what I'm trying to make comparisons to. But it's just something interesting where it's like, oh yeah, we're probably not going to. My point for bringing him up is because we probably won't see any 100 stuff at all. Maybe, I don't know. They might play into like them ramping stuff up and getting a little chaotic. But I feel like they're all going to be deep on the like down low now, just because it's like they don't want no trouble, because it'd be more hassle to do anything right now, especially now with the military and the ASA kind of in control and on high alert like that. So I didn't actually get an answer to it, but I'm assuming it's kind of what I was kind of talking about, the reason why she's not doing the thunder thing. Because I guess while Black Lightning's away, and I guess if she puts on the suit, she's going to draw too much attention to herself. But as Blackbird, it's like she's kind of more of a, because if she's thunder, it makes more of a notice. But she's Blackbird, she can probably potentially kind of blend in. And once again, I guess it's because, like I said, thunder has too much of a name and reputation that would draw too many people's attention, even the Markovians. So the family's trying to do the low-key thing, which I guess maybe it also gets to... Blackbird also lets them get around the fact is of like, they don't know that that's Jennifer. They know that Jennifer's Thunder, but they don't know about her being Blackbird. So now I'm thinking about it, it's like, no, that's about avoiding the ASA. If there's any issues, it's like, oh, she's just some other metahuman. They don't realize that it's, Anissa. Hence why, also like Jennifer has like the disguise situation, which is interesting that, she doesn't, that Anissa doesn't just take advantage of that herself, but I guess it's like, well, she already kind of has an alternate superhero ego. This one skews heavy into vigilante side, where Thunder did too, but I feel like Thunder reigns more hero than vigilante, and I feel like Blackbird is super far, vigilante angle, but regardless, also, is it me or just, like, I don't know, she's always been a skilled fighter, but I feel like this season, I don't know, there's like her maneuvers and just her skills, I'm like, I feel like Anissa's kicking ass in like a very, like, stylish martial arts way. It's just, I don't know, just the way she's fighting seems like more stylized. I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not remembering season 1 and season 2 that well, but I feel like her fighting style is just like the takedowns and stuff that she did, it was fucking impressive. I don't know why, it just seemed like her fighting has gotten more advanced. Maybe that's my imagination, or it really has. I assume so, but regardless, she does help a whole bunch of people get onto the outside of Freeland, because apparently like there's a barrier that keeps them out. But as she was helping them, she gets hit with a grenade and gets knocked out, and now it's like the whole thing of like, well, Gamby and Jennifer are stuck on the inside, being like, okay, so what do we do about Anissa? It's like, well, we have to wait, which obviously Jennifer's not a big fan of waiting, which I'm curious to see what goes down there. But Jennifer, because obviously Jennifer can be very hot-headed, so the question would be going, well, is she going to go try and do something on her own? Obviously, many instances have shown that is not a good idea. So is she going to heed Gamby's advice and actually wait? Because an angle of this we haven't seen too much is the whole what is Freeland like on other angles, like, on a normalcy level of like, because, Jennifer wants to be normal and everything, but there's no going back to being normal after everything. Because even in this, it's like ever since that hotel room, it's just like you have never been, like your normal life kind of got thrown out the window. But like we see her at school, Jennifer at school for a little bit, but beyond that, we don't know what because it's still got to be weird and awkward of like, yeah, basically the whole city's under martial law and just like, what does normalcy look like under those circumstances, because we've seen the more every other aspect of it except the normal side of things, so a lot of very interesting developments here in Freeland. I'm very interested to see, where all this ends up taking us going forward. I mean, I'm curious also, like, because obviously Anissa will get a look at it, but it's like, what's it like outside of Freeland? Like, what's it look like from the outside looking in type of situation? What does the outside people think? Or is it just kind of like, well, it's a government thing. People don't ask too many questions or they get shooed away. I'm curious, like, how that whole situation plays out. But regardless, I'm very excited to see, like I said, where the season kind of goes from here with what they've set up is going to be very interesting. Obviously, the Markovians, but it almost seems like the ASA is more of the issue, but they might be a means to an end of dealing with the Markovian thing, and then we'll circle back to kind of deal with the ASA once and for all. We'll ultimately see, because it's going to be hard to do that, like I said, since this whole thing runs up super far up the chain, so we'll see how everything plays out in the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.